All right, team, welcome to another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Matt Hamilton. Delighted to have your company with me once again. Always much appreciated when you guys tune in. Now, we're going to do things a little bit differently this time around. Normally, I will pick in a particular topic and we will, as you know, do a deep dive into it. Usually I'll pick an example from history which helps inform the discussion, but today we're going to go a different way. I'm going to focus on question and answer time. I've seen one pop up that I just could not resist dealing with, and it deals with how to find the balance in the workplace between being approachable while also maintaining authority. And I think this is particularly an issue that traditionally nice people deal with. So let's get straight into it. How do you balance being approachable with maintaining authority? This young leader asks. And they go on to detail the question as follows. I recently stepped into a leadership role after years as an IC, and one thing I'm still figuring out is how to walk the line between being approachable and being in charge. On the one hand, I want my team to feel comfortable sharing concerns, mistakes, or ideas without worrying about judgment. On the other hand, I've noticed that being too casual sometimes leads to boundaries getting blurred. For example, people miss deadlines, they might push back harder than they would otherwise, or they assume flexibility where there isn't any. So here are my questions, and there are three. Number one, how do you establish trust and openness without losing authority? 2, are there specific habits or practices that help reinforce respect? And 3, any mistakes you made early on that you would warn newer leaders about? What a fantastic question. Let's get into it. So number one, how do you establish trust and openness without losing authority? So in this situation, it sounds like this leader is encountering behaviors that are pushing the boundary a little bit. It doesn't sound like they're in a situation where they just haven't had to have a difficult conversation with someone because the team members are behaving or performing so well. It sounds like we're beyond that, and it sounds like we're at the point where this leader's starting to see behaviors that are concerning them. Okay. The only way to establish trust and openness without losing authority in that setting is literally to have the difficult conversation with people who are, in your view, perhaps stretching the friendship a little, so to speak. I'm just going to have a drink of coffee here. I'm just getting over a cold, and so I burst into the occasional coughing fit unless I've got some sort of hot drink with me, so excuse me. Okay, much better. So you need to very clearly identify the behavior that you think is perhaps stretching the friendship and is a little inappropriate. And if it is something that is occurring on a regular basis, you need to have that conversation with the employee. And you need to set that behavior out against the standard that you do respect. So before that you do expect rather. So before you go in and have that difficult conversation, you need to be very, very clear in your own mind what the standard is that you expect. All right. So it might be a casual, informal conversation with the person. I'd suggest this is the avenue that you take. You don't want to make it, an official, sort of HR conversation just yet. I mean, we're looking to simply offer people guidance here. And so what I'd suggest to you is once you're clear on what you would like to see the behavior reconfigured to, I would suggest that you catch up with that person for a casual coffee, go for a walk around the block with them, get them off site, and just have a bit of a heart-to-heart with them. Hey, listen, this is something that I've observed. It isn't really behavior that I think complements what we're trying to achieve here. Maybe it makes it difficult for you to do your job because X, Y, and Z. Have a good think about it. And then just ask them to address it in a friendly, kind, informal manner. And that does two things. Number one, it shows that you're not overreacting, which means you're not insecure. You don't go from 0 to 100 super quickly. And you give them the opportunity to correct the behavior. You've given them that opportunity. That's really important. Because if they don't know that it's not the right thing to do, then they don't know that it needs to be corrected. And I think quite often you'll find that you are given respect because you've been prepared to broach the topic, where a lot of people aren't. But you've also struck that balance between being formal and getting your message across and too formal. So that's what I always suggest, is keep it a little bit more informal in the first instance, if there's not been any major breaches of conduct and it is just, annoying, niggling behaviors, and see if you can appeal to the heart a little bit and get people out for a coffee, get the walls down that way, and go with the soft approach. Now, if you find after you do that the behavior doesn't stop, after you've clearly set out the reasons that you need it to be reconfigured, and you've clearly let the employee know what the standard is that you need them to aim for, well, then you might want to go down the more formal approach, because you've given them the option to correct in a friendly, informal way. They've declined to do that, and so you're left with essentially your plan B, which is to go down a more formal HR-based route, and that would be a formal warning, formal verbal warning. So that's how I'd suggest you handle that one. Now, question 2, are there specific habits or practices that help reinforce respect? And quite frankly, this boils down to a couple of key aspects in my view. Number one, you must not be afraid to broach the topic. If people feel that you're a walkover, if they feel that you're a doormat, they will continue to treat you as such. You earn respect by being unafraid to have that confrontation. All right. But additionally, and we sort of touched on this a little bit before, the other thing that wins you respect, on top of the fact that you're obviously not afraid to broach the topic, is the way that you do it. And if you maintain a really calm, even, reasonable disposition while you have this conversation, you show the person respect in their own right by treating them like a human, getting them out for a coffee, not being so insecure that, this has to escalate, from 0 to 100 really quickly and we have to go the formal route straight away. Making sure you don't do that because it comes across as insecure. That is definitely a way that you can ensure that you reinforce that respect as well. People respect you for having the conversation, being a decent human being, approaching it gracefully. So don't underestimate the power of a bit of kindness as well. I think it's a really nice way to strike that balance. We're having the conversation, but I'm doing it in a human-to-human manner that doesn't come across as uptight and insecure. It also gives them the benefit of the doubt, which I really like as well. Perhaps they just behave like that because they got sloppy and they didn't realize that it upset you. Now, any mistakes you made early on that you would warn new leaders about? And I would probably combine this answer by including mistakes that I've seen others make as well, because I think they're worth discussion in this context. The first, we'll focus on me for a second. I, in the early days, and still to some extent, used to really feel bad about the apprehension I would feel ahead of a difficult conversation. I used to beat myself up a little bit for it. I'm a lot better at it these days just simply through practice. But in the early days, it was something that I would lose sleep over. it isn't an unusual experience. Some people fear it so much, some people find it so unpalatable that they just avoid it altogether. So what I want to focus on here from a mistakes perspective and see if it will relate to you guys is, don't beat yourself up for feeling that this is really difficult. It is really difficult. It would be strange if you guys were looking forward to a difficult conversation. I think it's healthy that it's not something you enjoy. So in terms of mistakes, from my own personal perspective, I think I probably beat myself up a little bit over how apprehensive I used to be about having those difficult conversations. Now, I managed to go ahead and do it anyway, but it wasn't without judgment of myself, and probably a little bit harshly in some cases. So if you guys feel like that, and if the person who has submitted this question feels this way, don't beat yourself up over feeling anxious and apprehensive ahead of having these conversations. It would be weird, as I said, if you didn't have those feelings. Even now, after many, many more years of leadership and many difficult conversations under the belt, I still really don't enjoy them. I still would much prefer not to be having them, but it is what it is, and they must be had. Now, I mentioned that I'd combine that answer with mistakes I'd observed in others that are worth talking about in this context, and I'm going to focus on one in particular, and this was common, and that was the belief, seemingly the belief, that if you ignored bad behavior, it would sort itself out and it would go away. And I can tell you that it is irrefutable that actually the opposite is true. If you ignore bad behavior and you let it slide, it only gets worse because the person feels empowered. They have no respect for you whatsoever. They treat you like a doormat. They understand there's no consequences for their actions, and it doesn't get better, it only gets worse. In this instance, I think that is the primary mistake that you must avoid making. Do not be afraid, or perhaps better worded is, do not be unwilling to have that difficult conversation. Because any difficulty that you feel in the short term is far outweighed by the long-term consequences that you and the team will face if you let bad behavior fester. Now, I have seen this play out with a particularly difficult individual where there was no ambiguity with respect to their behavior. It was absolutely inappropriate. Everybody knew it was inappropriate. This person had a reputation with customers and colleagues all the way through to senior management as being incredibly difficult and just downright rude in the workplace. And yet nothing was done until I got in to a leadership role where I proceeded to do something about it. And before I took the reins of that team, I made sure that I sat down with each team member to get their view on how they thought the place was running, and I asked them what are the top 2 or 3 things that you would change. And every single one of these people mentioned this individual and their behavior. All right, so there were people who were looking for other roles to move into with other organizations. Such was the level of discontent over this person's behavior. Such was the impact on their mental health, right? They were getting to the point where they were dreading coming to work every day because they didn't know what sort of a mood this person was going to be in and what they'd have to deal with. So never underestimate the long-term damage that can be done through simply looking in the other direction as a leader and refusing to have the conversation. That is the primary mistake, all right? So look, just some concise advice there for you to focus on. Great question. Really enjoyed answering that one, and something that I think most of us can relate to. And I hope that helps. Guys, until next time, I will sign off, but I just want to thank those of you who have taken the time to tune in, and remind those of you that perhaps haven't subscribed yet to please go ahead and do so on whatever podcast app you consume the show on. And if you're feeling really generous, why don't you leave us a 5-star review? And of course, Tell all your friends about the podcast if you get value from the show. But until next week, guys, stay safe and I'll talk to you soon.